Chapter 7. Bran. Izzi woke the way you surfaced from bad wine, slow, sticky, and confused. At first there was only darkness and the sour copper taste of regret on her tongue. Her head felt too heavy for her neck, as if the mountain had poured stones into her skull while she slept. She tried to inhale and the air caught halfway, thick and cold, scraping down her throat. Then a sound sliced through the fog. A scream, high, raw, and sudden, ripping across the clearing like cloth tearing. Izzi flinched, but the movement came late, delayed, as though her body was wading through syrup. The scream faded into echoes between the trees, swallowed by the mountain's bowl. For a heartbeat there was silence, and in that silence her pulse began to hammer, trying to drag her awake by force. Her voice came out as a rasp. She blinked. Once. Twice. The tent ceiling swam above her, a pale blur of cloth that rocked gently as if the world itself was breathing. Her stomach rolled with it. She squeezed her eyes shut, willing the spinning to stop. Another sound. Lower now. A desperate, choking sob. A voice calling a name she couldn't catch. Izzi forced her eyes open again. Shapes. Shadows. The dim blue-gray of early dawn leaking through the tent seams. Her bedroll beneath her felt damp with cold. Her limbs were sluggish, uncooperative, like she'd been drugged. Something brushed her leg. Izzi's breath snagged. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't cloth. It was pressure, a touch, sliding upward from her shin toward her knee with eerie intention. She tried to jerk away and only managed a weak twitch. The sensation moved again, up her thigh, slow, searching. Panic flared, bright and hot, cutting through the wine haze like a struck match. Izzi's hand fumbled for the dagger she always kept close. Her fingers closed on nothing but a blanket. She blinked hard, trying to make her eyes focus, trying to understand why her body wouldn't listen. Tella? She croaked. Because Tella had been beside her. Tella had fallen asleep with her. Tella had... The shape beside her resolved, a face close in the dim, pale, too still. Izzi's vision sharpened in a sick, snapping lurch, and the world finally made sense in the worst way possible. Tella lay on her side, inches from Izzi's face. Her eyes were open, not blinking, not wet with sleep. Wide and glassy, fixed on Izzi like she'd been frozen mid-thought. Her mouth hung slightly parted as if she'd tried to speak and never finished. There was dark staining at her throat, soaked into her collar and the bedding beneath her. Too much, too wrong. The kind of mess that didn't belong in a warm tent with giggling girls and spilled wine. For half a heartbeat, Izzi didn't breathe. Then her brain caught up and tried to reject it. No. The word came out thin, almost childlike. She shoved back hard, too hard, and her shoulder slammed into the tent wall. The world tipped again, but the terror held it steady. She stared at Tella's corpse, at the terrible stillness of her, at the way her hair lay untouched as if even death hadn't dared disturb it. The hand on Izzi's thigh tightened. Not a gentle touch. It gripped hard. Warm fingers, rough fingers, closed around her bare leg, and Izzi realized with a bolt of nausea that there wasn't just one hand. It was one man. A weight shifted on top of her. A presence too solid, too human to be mist or magic. The tent canvas creaked softly as someone leaned in close enough that Izzi caught the faint stink of sweat and cheap liquor, and something sharper beneath it like iron left too long in the rain. Her vision swam, trying to catch up. The world still tilted from the wine, but terror nailed her to the moment. A face hovered near her shoulder, partly shadowed by the low dawn light threading through the seams. Broad jaw, harsh nose, eyes that didn't hold warmth even in firelight. Bran, the quiet one, the axeman, the one who never joked, the one who had smirked. Izzi's throat tightened so hard it hurt. Her dagger hand twitched, too slow, too clumsy, hung over limbs betraying her. Bran's hand slid higher, squeezing at her breast. His other pressed into her hip, pinning her by weight alone. Izzi's stomach lurched. Tella? She rasped again, because her eyes kept dragging back to the corpse beside her. Tella's open stare, the stillness, the dark stain at her throat that had already gone tacky. The sight of her made Izzi's skin crawl, made the tent feel too small, too close, too wrong. Bran followed her gaze and smiled like it amused him. "Hush now," he murmured, voice low and rough, as if scolding a dog that wouldn't lie down. His hand pinched her nipple between his thumb and index finger. A scream split the clearing outside, distant, choked off too quickly. Izzi flinched at the sound, heart punching against her ribs. Bran didn't even look toward it, didn't start, didn't react, like he expected it, like it was part of the plan. Izzi tried to shove backward, away from him, away from Tella's dead eyes. Bran's hand tightened around her hip, hot fingers biting into her side, while his weight shifted forward, trapping her more fully. The edge of his forearm pressed against her ribs, keeping her pinned without needing to use much force at all. "You're awake," he said, almost conversational. "Good." Izzi's fingers finally found leather, her dagger's hilt half buried in blanket and bedroll. Relief flashed bright, immediate. Then Bran saw it. His hand shot down like a striking snake and caught her wrist. His grip was brutal and efficient, knuckles squeezing bone. Izzi hissed, pain spiking up her arm. The dagger slipped from her fingers and thunked uselessly into the bedding. Bran leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. "That's the one thing I didn't want," he said softly, almost disappointed. Izzi bared her teeth. "Get off me." He chuckled once under his breath, humorless. "This is the best part." Izzi twisted, trying to knee him, but her leg tangled against the bedroll and the corpse beside her. She recoiled instinctively from brushing Tella's cold sleeve, nausea rolling hard. Bran seized the opportunity, his hands pinning both of Izzi's wrists above her head. He enjoyed the resistance he felt in each grip as he gradually began to lift Izzi's tunic, exposing her body. He yearned to gaze upon her naked body. Outside, boots pounded. A voice barked a name, someone's voice, sharp and furious. Another voice answered. Someone, panicked and scared. And then a wet, awful sound, like something struck flesh. Izzi went rigid. Bran's eyes flicked toward the tent wall as if listening, then back to Izzi. His expression didn't change, but something pleased slid into it, satisfaction as smooth as oil. "Don't worry about them," he murmured. "You'll see them after we're done." Izzi's mind raced through fog. Sirius was gone, inside the cave with him. Gods, how had she not? She bucked her exposed hips and slammed her forehead toward his face. Her aim was sloppy, but desperation made it fierce. Her head connected with his cheekbone. Bran grunted, more surprise than pain, and his grip loosened for a fraction of a second. Izzi snatched it. She ripped one of her wrists free and clawed for the dagger, fingers closing on the hilt. She didn't even think. She drove the blade downward. Steel bit into Bran's shoulder through cloth. He jerked back with a sharp, angry hiss. Izzi scrambled, hauling herself away on elbows and knees, bedroll twisting around her legs. She nearly tripped over Tella's body again and gagged, tears stinging her eyes from fury and shock. Bran grabbed her ankle and yanked. Izzi hit the ground hard, breath exploding out of her. Her hands slid on cold, packed earth. The tent smelled like ash and blood and old wine. "Stubborn!" Bran spat, the first real heat in his voice. His face had changed, calm mask cracking, something uglier behind it now she'd made him bleed. Izzi kicked wildly and caught him in the ribs. He grunted again, more annoyed than hurt, and surged forward to grab her wrist, and the tent flap snapped open, flooding the space with gray dawn. Cold light spilled across the bedrolls, across Izzi's scattered gear, across Tella's terrible stillness. For one disorienting heartbeat, Izzi thought the mountain itself had pried the tent open to look in. Then a silhouette filled the entrance. Broad shoulders, a familiar outline. Steel in hand. Kaelin. Bran's head snapped toward the opening, the smallest flicker of surprise breaking his composure. It was all Izzi needed. She lunged, not with grace, not with finesse, but with pure, snarling desperation, and drove her fingers into the torn spot on Bran's shoulder where her dagger had bitten into. She dug in hard, nails scraping through cloth into raw pain. Bran jerked with a sharp, involuntary sound. Kaelin moved like a guillotine dropping. His blade cut through the dim in a clean, brutal arc aimed for Bran's chest. Bran twisted at the last instant, the sword missing a killing strike by a breath, but the force of it still caught him hard, slamming him backward out of the tent as if Kaelin had swung the mountain itself. Bran flew through the opening and hit the ground outside with a wet, ugly thud. The tent wall ripped as he went, canvas tearing open in a long, jagged mouth along the side, letting in a slice of dawn and the sharp scent of blood and cold grass. The ropes shuddered. A stake popped loose. The whole tent sagged for a moment, like it might collapse. Kaelin stepped in fully, filling the space with his presence, sword raised, eyes burning. He looked at Izzi, one quick, assessing scan. Her disheveled tunic, her bare legs, the panic still clinging to her like smoke. Then his gaze flicked once, hard, to Tella's corpse. His jaw clenched so tight the muscles jumped. Then he looked back at Izzi, voice low and rough. "Did he?" Izzi's throat tightened. She swallowed bile and fury and the urge to break down all at once. "No," she forced out, the word coming sharp as a snapped string. No. Kaelin nodded once, short, violent relief and rage tangled together. He didn't lower his sword. Izzi scrambled upright, hands shaking as she yanked her undergarments back into place and tugged her tunic down properly. Her fingers fumbled, clumsy with fear and hangover and adrenaline, but she made herself move, made herself function. She snatched her rapier first, the familiar weight anchoring her. Then her daggers, 1, 2, sliding into her hands like old promises. Her breathing came hard, loud in the cramped space. The tent smelled of spilled wine and sweat and the metallic ghost of violence. Kaelin angled his body between her and the torn opening, blade pointed outward, listening. For a second there was the crackle of the dying fire outside, smothered, weak, and the distant moan of wind through trees. Then Izzi heard it, a sound that did not belong in any sane morning. Laughter. This was low, thick with amusement, wrongly calm. Izzi's stomach dropped. She moved toward the ripped side of the tent, peering through the jagged opening. Outside, gray light washed the clearing. The fire pit was a ruin of embers. The tent stood half open and abandoned, like the camp had been emptied in a hurry. And there, just beyond the torn canvas. Bran stood upright again, wiping blood from his shoulder with 2 fingers like it was an annoyance. At his feet lay Varn, still, twisted at an angle that made Izzi's vision stutter. His crossbow was spilled beside him in the grass, useless. Bran's mouth curved, not a smile, not really, something colder. He laughed again, soft as a private joke. Izzi's blood turned to ice. Kaelin's voice came like a growl at her shoulder, too controlled. Don't look away from him. And the laughter outside kept going. Kaelin moved fast. He drove through the torn canvas like a battering ram, shoulder and sword and fury, ripping the opening wider as he burst into the clearing. Izzi followed on instinct, stumbling out behind him, barefoot on cold grass, rapier in hand, mouth full of ash and panic. The air hit her like a slap. Smoke. Thick, choking smoke rolling low across the clearing, blurring the trees into ghost shapes. Flames crawled up tent cloth in hungry sheets, orange tongues devouring rope and canvas, sending embers spiraling. Someone's gear popped and crackled in the heat. The fire pit had been disturbed, kicked apart, its stones scattered, its coals flung wide like a shattered jaw. Izzi's eyes snapped immediately to the body. Varn lay in the grass at Bran's feet, limp as discarded cloth. His head was split by violence too clean to be an accident. The crossbow lay a yard away, abandoned mid-reach. His fingers were still curled as if he'd tried to grab it. Bran stood over him like a monument. And he was still laughing. The laugh sat low in his chest, a quiet, steady amusement that made Izzi's skin crawl. It wasn't joy, it was certainty. A fresh, massive slash gaped across his chest, Kaelin's work. It should have opened him to the ribs. Blood streaked down his stomach in dark lines, dripping onto the grass, but he stood like it was nothing. Like pain belonged to other people. Izzi's gaze whipped around the clearing, frantic. Priscilla, Sirius. Her voice cracked on Sirius's name. Where are they? Kaelin didn't take his eyes off Bran. His sword stayed raised, point steady. They went after Ressa, he said, voice a low grind. Into the cave. Izzi's heart lurched. Ressa's? Kaelin didn't answer that. His jaw flexed once, hard. The kind of silence that meant the truth was worse than a word. Bran's laughter softened into a breathy exhale. He crouched casually, almost lazily, beside Varn's corpse and wrapped a hand around the haft of the axe lodged in the dead man's skull. Izzi's stomach rolled. Bran yanked it free with a wet, scraping sound. Blood sprayed in a thin arc across the grass. Bran didn't even flinch. He just shook the axe once like it was a tool that needed clearing, droplets flinging off in dark beads. Then, as if he were arming himself for a simple spar, he turned and reached into the ruined fire pit. Izzi saw it, half buried in ash and stone, a sword that had been resting there among the coals like someone had hidden it. Bran's fingers closed around the hilt, the metal should have burned him. Instead he pulled it free in one smooth motion, ash drifting off the blade like black snow. The edge caught the dawn light and flashed cold. Izzi's mind skittered, trying to make sense of it. Kaelin, she whispered, horrified. That cut? Bran rolled his shoulders like he was loosening up. Blood still ran down his torso, but the gash didn't gape the way it should. The skin around it looked strange. Not healing, not closing, but refusing to be torn further, like something beneath it held the wound in place. Izzi's grip tightened on her rapier until her knuckles went white. How is he? Kaelin's voice came flat, stunned in a way Izzi had rarely heard from him. "I hit him," he said quietly. "I felt it." Bran lifted the sword, testing its weight with a lazy, one-handed swing. The blade hummed faintly through the smoky air. Kaelin took half a step forward, eyes fixed on Bran's chest as if his mind couldn't accept what it was seeing. "It didn't feel like flesh," he muttered. "It felt like..." His brows pulled together, expression twisting with disbelief. "Like I hit metal." Bran's laughter stopped. For the first time, his eyes sharpened, cold focus settling over his features like a drawn hood. He looked from Kaelin to Izzi, lingering on her for a beat too long, like he was savoring the fear he'd planted. Then he smiled. A thin, cruel curve, smoke drifted between them. The tents crackled and collapsed one by one, throwing sparks into the gray morning. Somewhere from the cave mouth, far side of the clearing, came a faint echo of movement. A distant shout. Then silence again, swallowed by stone. Izzi swallowed hard, voice shaking despite herself. What are you?" Bran shifted his stance, axe in one hand, sword in the other, blood dripping steadily down his ribs like spilled paint. And he stepped forward as if the clearing belonged to him. Bran stood in the smoke like a man enjoying a private show, one boot planted near Varn's shoulder as if the corpse was just another piece of gear tossed carelessly into the grass. He glanced down at the body with mild interest, then nudged it with the toe of his boot until Varn's head lolled at an angle that made Izzi's stomach twist. "Was hoping he'd last longer," Bran said, voice carrying easily through the crackle of burning canvas. He had that look about him, like the little shit could do something. Kaelin's jaw tightened. His greatsword remained raised, but his knuckles went white around the hilt. He didn't move, didn't give Bran the satisfaction. Izzi's breath came shallow. Smoke stung her eyes, but fury burned hotter. "Get your foot off him," she said, voice low. Bran's gaze slid to her slowly, like a blade drawn from a sheath. He lifted his boot higher, deliberate, taunting, then let it fall back down onto the grass beside Varn's ribs with a soft thud. "Sensitive," he mused. "That's good. Makes this more fun." Kaelin took a single step forward, blade steady. "You done," he growled. "Drop the weapons." Bran laughed, short, contemptuous, and leaned down to wipe his blood-slick chest with the back of his hand, as if he were merely sweaty. The slash Kaelin had opened still ran across him like a red grin, blood trailing down his stomach, but he held himself with the ease of someone uninjured. "You hit hard," Bran said, and his eyes flicked to Kaelin's sword with something like admiration, almost felt it. Then he looked back at Izzi, lingering, measuring. "And you," he said softly, like he was savoring the words. "Still shaking. Still pretending you're not. Fucking beautiful." Izzi's grip tightened on her rapier. She fought to keep her face smooth. Her eyes kept darting toward the cave mouth through the smoke, as if she could will Sirius back out of it by force. Bran noticed. "Looking for your stoic hero?" he asked, voice light. He ran after the loud one. Kaelin didn't take the bait. "Where are they?" Bran shrugged one shoulder. "Doesn't matter." He lifted his sword slightly, ash drifting from the blade. "I'll send you to see them." Izzi felt her pulse hammer, her thoughts skittered. Sirius. Priscilla. The cave. The rune that said death. Bran's smile thinned, then he tilted his head, almost thoughtful, and said, "Don't worry, I'm not going to kill you right away." Izzi's eyes narrowed. "How generous." Bran's gaze dropped slow, deliberate to the torn hem of her tunic, to the bare skin above her knee, to the way she'd dressed in a rush. His smile sharpened into something uglier. "I'll leave you mostly in one piece," he corrected. "So you and I can finish what we started in the tent, alive just enough to feel it." Kaelin's control snapped like a rope. He lunged. The greatsword came in a large, sweeping arc, enough force behind it to split a man in half. Smoke tore around the blade as it cut through the air. Bran met it head-on. His broadsword flashed up at the last instant, catching Kaelin's swing with a sound like a bell struck underwater, clang, and a spray of sparks burst into the smoky dawn. Kaelin grunted, boots digging into the grass as the impact shuddered up his arms. The force should have driven Bran back. Bran held, not with strain, not with effort, just held, as if Kaelin's strength was a weight he'd anticipated and already decided he could carry. Izzi moved immediately. she slipped to Bran's flank, rapier darting in between Kaylin's heavy swipes, aiming for the soft places, under ribs, inside the arm, the gap between collarbone and shoulder. Quick, precise, lethal. Her point found him. She felt the brief give of skin, and then an odd resistance, like trying to push a needle into hardened leather. The rapier scraped, deflected. Not fully, but enough that her blade skittered along his torso instead of sinking deep. A thin line of blood welled where she'd struck, proof that she had cut him, but Bran didn't even blink. He didn't hiss, didn't flinch, didn't react with pain at all. He only smiled wider, eyes gleaming as if she'd done something amusing. Izzi struck again, faster, 2 thrusts, then a third, each one landing, each one leaving shallow cuts that should have made him recoil. Instead, it felt worse with each hit. Her rapier kept catching, sliding, bouncing in tiny, unsettling ways, like his skin was refusing to be pierced, like something beneath it was harder than it should be. Kaylin snarled and drove another heavy swing down, trying to crush Bran's guard. Bran parried again, sparks spitting, his boots barely shifting as if the ground itself braced for him. Izzi's mouth went dry. It wasn't just that Bran wasn't afraid. It was that the fight didn't feel fair. Her blade, her elegant, trusted blade, felt like it was being turned aside by something that wasn't armor and wasn't flesh. Izzi darted back a half step, eyes locking on Bran's chest where the massive slash still bled. "How?" she breathed, not even meaning to speak. Bran's gaze flicked to her weapon with a faint, mocking curiosity. Then he shoved Kaylin's sword aside with a twist of his wrist, too strong, too easy, and stepped toward Izzi as if Kaylin wasn't even there. "Careful, little elf," he murmured. "You'll dull that pretty thing." And the smoke rolled thicker between them, as if the clearing itself wanted to hide what happened next. Izzi and Kaylin moved together. No words, no signal, just the same instinct they'd learned the hard way. Hit from both sides, don't let him breathe. Kaylin came in with raw force, greatsword sweeping low to high like a rising execution. Izzi slid in from the opposite flank, rapier darting for the gaps that should have existed, under the ribs, the soft hollow beneath the collarbone. Bran deflected Kaylin's blade with a brutal twist of his broadsword, clang, sparks spitting bright against the smoke, and Izzi's thrust landed clean and skittered. Her rapier didn't bite, it didn't sink, it bounced with a sickening recoil like her point had struck something too dense beneath his skin. The force snapped up her arm, jarred her shoulder. She gritted her teeth and shoved again. The blade ricocheted harder. The rapier tore free from her grip. It flew, spinning end over end, skidding across the grass and disappearing for a heartbeat into the smoke. "Izzi!" Kaylin barked, but Bran was already capitalizing. The axe came down, fast, heavy. A crescent of iron aimed to split her from shoulder to hip. Izzi threw herself sideways on instinct. The blade missed her skin by a whisper, close enough that she felt the wind of it, but it hooked her tunic as it passed, tearing fabric open at her navel in a savage, ripping gash. Cold air hit exposed skin. Fear hit hotter. Izzi didn't retreat, she rushed him. Before Bran could recover his swing, she surged in and grabbed his axe arm with both hands, locking her fingers around his wrist and forearm with a fighter's grip. Her boots slid in the grass, but she anchored, then drove an uppercut straight into his jaw with every ounce of strength she had left. Her knuckles connected with a solid, satisfying crack. Bran's head snapped back. For the first time, he staggered, one step, then another, blood spraying from his mouth in a dark thread that vanished into smoke. He blinked like he couldn't quite believe it. Then his eyes sharpened into something vicious. "Elf whore!" He spat, literally spat, red stringing from his lips, voice thick with hate. Izzi's chest heaved, her hand throbbed with pain, but the sight of him reeling, lit a fierce, confused triumph inside her. Kaylin saw it too. His brows drew down, expression twisting with the same question that clawed at Izzi's mind. A punch hurt him, but steel didn't. Izzi's gaze flicked down to Bran's torso, those shallow cuts, the massive slash still bleeding, and yet he moved like he was made of something else. "How?" Kaylin growled under his breath. "No time! Aim for his face!" Izzi snapped, and dove for her rapier. She found it half buried in grass, still gleaming, absurdly intact. She snatched it up just as Bran charged her. The axe came first, wide, meant to force her back, then the sword behind it like the real bite. Izzi danced back a step, rapier up, trying to angle for Kaylin's cover. Kaylin hit Bran from the side with a bellow, steel sweeping in. Bran's attention snapped toward him, like a dog turning toward the louder threat. "Fuck you, orc!" Bran snarled. "I'll end you first!" He slashed at Kaelin in a brutal horizontal cut. Kaelin met it, blade against blade, the impact shuddering through the clearing. Sparks burst again, too many sparks, too bright, as if the air wanted to scream. They broke apart only for Bran to come down hard with an overhead blow. Kaelin braced and caught it on the flat of his greatsword. The force drove Kaelin's boots into the earth, shoulders bowing under the weight. Kaelin's teeth bared in a growl. For a heartbeat they were locked. Bran leaning in, grinning through blood. Kaelin pushing back with raw fury. Then they separated, and Bran's left hand flicked. The axe left his grip. Izzi's eyes widened. "Kaelin!" But it was too late. The weapon spun through smoke and dawn and struck with a wet, heavy thunk, burying itself into Kaelin's shoulder. Kaelin's roar tore from him. Pain and rage tangled together. His sword dipped. Blood immediately darkened his sleeve, running down his arm in thick lines. He staggered, gasping through clenched teeth. Bran's face lit up. "Die," he bellowed, voice ripping across the clearing as he surged forward, sword raised to finish it. No hesitation now, just the hungry certainty of someone about to end a story. Izzi's body moved before thought could catch it. She drew a dagger and threw. The blade flashed end over end, aimed for Bran's eye. Clean, perfect, anything to stop him. Bran turned at the last instant. The dagger didn't bury into his skull, it sheared. It took his right ear clean off. A thin, awful line opened at the base of his neck as the blade grazed lower, blood spilling in a hot arc. Bran screamed, not in pain so much as in fury, a raw animal sound that shook smoke from the air. He slapped a hand to the side of his head, fingers coming away wet with blood. His eyes snapped to Izzi with murder in them. "You!" he spat, voice ragged. "I'm going to!" He breathed hard, shoulders heaving. "I'm really going to enjoy breaking you the fuck in when I'm done with him!" Izzi's heart slammed in her chest, but her face went cold. Kaelin was on one knee, then hand locked around the axe haft in his shoulder, shaking with pain. Bran was 3 strides from him, sword still up. Izzi stepped forward anyway, rapier raised, dagger hand empty now, breath steadying into something sharp. "Try," she said, voice low as the edge of steel. And the smoke thickened around them like the clearing itself leaned in to watch who broke first. Izzi heard it, sharp and small beneath the roar of fire and the ringing of steel. A click. Between Bran's boots, something had fallen into the grass. No bigger than a clenched fist, half hidden by smoke and ash. It pulsed with a cold, blue glow that didn't belong to any flame. An amulet, etched with fine, looping sigils that crawled with light as if the metal itself was breathing. Izzi's stomach dropped. Bran's boot shifted, and the amulet's glow flared brighter, like it had been waiting for her to notice. She looked up, and Bran was gone. In his place stood a man she'd never met, and somehow felt she already knew. He was taller than Bran's glamoured shape, broader through the shoulders and clad in full armor, dark plates and layered mail, scarred with use. Small dents peppered his breastplate like old memories, and one large, fresh crater sat near the center left, exactly where Kaelin's first strike had landed. A man wearing a face that fit the violence better. Kaelin's voice ripped through the smoke, raw with realization. "I know who that is!" Izzi flinched at the sound. Kaelin staggered upright, thin hand clamped around the axe lodged in his shoulder, blood soaking his sleeve. His eyes were wild, fixed on the armored figure like he'd seen a ghost step out of a lie. "He's one of Celene's hounds?" Kaelin bellowed. "The one from the springs. Qhorin." The armored man, Qhorin, tilted his head slightly, as if amused by being named. He wiped blood from the side of his head where his ear had been, and looked down at the blue amulet near his boot with a satisfied, almost fond glance. "Oh well," he breathed, voice thick with mirth. Then he looked back up, eyes gleaming like wet stone. "And what does that matter?" he asked softly. "When you're about to die." He moved, like a trained killer. Qhorin turned and drove his sword toward Kaelin in a straight, efficient thrust, aimed to go through ribs and end it fast. Kaelin threw himself sideways, rolling through the grass with a pained grunt, the axe in his shoulder jerking sickeningly with the motion. The blade missed by inches and sank into the earth with a solid, hungry thunk. Izzi lunged at the opening with a sudden, razor clarity. No more guessing, no more ricocheting steel off something unnatural. Now she knew. This was a man inside armor, a man who could bleed, a man who could die. She darted in toward Qhorin's head, rapier flashing for the gaps in his helm. Corin twisted, and instead of retreating, he slammed his elbow into her face. The blow cracked against her jaw. White pain exploded behind her eyes. She went down hard, the world tilting violently as grass and smoke and fire smeared together. Izzi tried to push up. Corin's fist tangled in her hair and yanked her head back. Stars burst in her vision. Her rapier was kicked away with a casual flick, skittering across the grass into the smoke. Corin dragged her a half step like she weighed nothing, then planted a boot near her hip to keep her down. He leaned close enough that Izzi smelled iron and ash through his armor. His sword rose slowly in his other hand. The edge wasn't just sharp, it was hot. Heated by the fire, the metal holding that cruel warmth the way a brand holds its promise. Corin smiled down at her as if he was choosing how to carve a roast. Kaylin's voice broke, ragged. "Don't..." Corin's eyes didn't even flick toward him. "You two," he said conversationally, "have been far more trouble than you're worth." He lowered the blades slow until Izzi could feel the heat kissing her skin. "I was just going to fuck her and end it quick," Corin murmured. "But now?" His smile sharpened. "Now I want it to hurt a bit more." He pressed the hot edge to Izzi's bare leg. Pain lanced through her, bright, vicious, immediate. The smell hit next, skin scorching, cloth singeing at the edge, her own scream ripping out of her throat before she could swallow it. Izzi thrashed, nails clawing at grass, but Corin held her down by her hair like she was a hooked fish. Kaylin roared, a wounded, furious sound, and with shaking hands he grabbed the axe lodged in his shoulder. He ripped it free. Blood spilled in a thick gush. Kaylin staggered, teeth clenched so hard his jaw looked like it might crack. Then he hurled the axe with all the strength he had left. The weapon spun through smoke and missed Corin completely, biting into the dirt a few feet away. Corin laughed again, delighted. "That's it?" he taunted, turning his head toward Kaylin. "That's the best you've got?" His attention drifted, just for a heartbeat, long enough for Izzi's eyes to lock on the axe where it lay. Close enough. Corin shifted his weight, lifting the blade from Izzi's leg with a cruel little satisfaction. He angled the sword back down, as if deciding where to hurt her next. Izzi's hand shot out, fingers closed around the axe haft. Corin didn't notice until the weapon was already moving. Izzi swung with pure fury. The axe rose in a swift arc aimed for Corin's face. Corin's eyes widened. He let go of Izzi's hair and jerked his arms up to shield himself. Too late. The axe carved through his raised hand. Fingers went with it, most of them severed in a wet, horrid spray. The blade didn't stop there. It continued into his cheek and across part of his face, ripping a jagged line through cheek and lips alike. Corin screamed, an animal sound, full of shock and rage. His sword clattered to the ground. Izzi shoved herself backward, panting, leg burning, hair half torn from her scalp, axe clutched in both hands like it was the only thing holding her upright. Corin staggered, blood pouring between the ruins of his fingers, down his jaw, soaking into the collar of his armor. His eyes found Izzi again, not amused now. Smoke rolled between them, fire cracked behind them. Izzi didn't wait for Corin to recover. She swung the axe again, two-handed, furious, aiming to split his skull the way the weapon had always been meant to. Corin, somehow, pushed through his own screaming ruin. Blood sheeted down his face, his hands mangled, fingers gone. But he moved anyway, more rage than reason, stepping into the swing instead of away. The axe buried into his shoulder with a heavy, ugly thunk. He didn't even stop. He drove forward, taking the impact like a man made of spite, and slammed into Izzi with all his weight. They hit the ground hard. Izzi's breath exploded out of her in a sharp, helpless woof. The world tilted. Sky, smoke, grass. Then Corin was on top of her, armor pressing down, hot and heavy, his breath ragged and wet as blood dripped onto her face. For a heartbeat, Izzi couldn't move. Then Kaylin roared and his greatsword came down in a savage swipe. Corin rolled off Izzi fast enough to avoid being cleaved in half, scrambling to his feet like a wounded animal. He ripped the axe out of his own shoulder with a violent yank, tearing it free in a spray of blood that darkened the grass. He staggered backward, hunched, dripping, a walking massacre, eyes locked on them with pure fury. Kaylin stepped forward, sword held ready. "Drop it," he growled. "It's over." Corin was dripping in blood. What came out next barely qualified as words, broken, shaky, full of hate. Then, "Come end it, bastard!" Kaylin didn't answer, he just lunged forward. The greatsword swept in a clean, killing arc. Corin tried to dodge. Steel crashed into him with a sound like splitting timber. Kaylin's blade tore through the side of Corin's armor, biting deep, metal shrieking, flesh giving way. The sword lodged for a heartbeat, stuck in the ruin it had made. Corin's mouth opened. Blood bubbled at his lips. "Fucking damn," he managed, each syllable dragged out like it cost him something to speak at all. Kaelin wrenched his blade free. Corin dropped to his knees, the axe still clutched in his remaining hand like he couldn't imagine dying without holding a weapon. His body swayed, his head dipped. He looked less like a man now and more like a pile of rage that hadn't realized it was already dead. Kaelin turned immediately toward Izzi. "You," he started, scanning her, checking for broken bones, looking ready to tear the mountain apart if she said the wrong thing. Izzi sucked in a shaky breath, pushing herself up on her elbows. Her ribs screamed. Her leg burned where the heated blade had kissed her. But she managed to force a crooked grin anyway, because if she didn't laugh, she was going to scream. "I'm fine," she rasped. "Just briefly acquainted with the ground," Kaelin huffed, half a laugh, half a snarl. "You've always had a talent for that," Izzi coughed a laugh that turned into a wince. "And you've always had a talent for picking fights with lunatics." Kaelin's eyes flicked toward Corin, kneeling, swaying, not quite collapsed yet. "He bleeds like any other," Kaelin muttered, voice hard. "Just took too long to figure out how." Izzi sat up fully, jaw tightening. Her gaze shot to the cave mouth through the smoke. "We have to go," she said, breathless. "Sirius and Priscilla." Kaelin nodded once, already shifting his weight to move. That's when Izzi's instincts screamed. A tiny sound, metal scraping stone. Izzi's head snapped up. "Kaelin!" Kaelin turned, and the axe left Corin's hand. It wasn't thrown with grace. It was thrown with the last ugly strength of a dying thing desperate to take someone down with it. Kaelin moved without thinking. He shifted into the line of it. The axe hit his back shoulder with a wet, heavy impact, biting deep. Kaelin's breath tore out of him in a grunt that sounded like pain swallowed mid-roar. His knees dipped, but he stayed standing because, of course he did. Corin finally collapsed in the grass like his strings had been cut. Izzi's face went white-hot with rage. She scrambled to Kaelin's side, hands already on him. "You absolute idiot!" she hissed, voice shaking. "What were you thinking?" Kaelin's teeth bared. "Thinking you don't take another hit," he ground out. Izzi's hands hovered over the axe haft, trembling. "You can't keep doing that," she snapped. "You can't keep—" "Gods, Kaelin!" Kaelin forced himself to breathe through it. "Izzi," he said, quieter now, "look at me." She did. His eyes were fierce, but there was a softness tucked behind the fury, something protective that made her chest tighten. "We don't have time," he said. "They're in the cave." Izzi swallowed hard, blinking fast. "Let me—" Her fingers clenched around the axe. "Let me get it out." Kaelin shook his head, then immediately regretted it. "Don't," he grunted, then steadied himself. "Fine, quick." Izzi planted her feet, braced him with one hand, and yanked the axe free with the other. Kaelin's whole body tensed. Blood spilled hot and fast, soaking through cloth. Izzi slapped a hand over the wound immediately, pressing hard. Kaelin hissed. "Hells, yeah," Izzi muttered, voice raw. "Hells is right." For a second, they'd breathed, Izzi's palm slick with Kaelin's blood, smoke curling around them, the mountain looming above like it was listening. Then Izzi's eyes snapped back to the cave. "I'm going," she said. Kaelin's brows pulled together. "Alone?" Izzi nodded once. "You're hurt." "And I—" Her voice caught, then hardened. "We can't wait." Kaelin didn't argue. He said, "I can tend to my wounds. Nothing I can't handle. I can't chase them in there like that." Kaelin's jaw worked. Finally, he exhaled through his nose. "But you come back," he growled. Izzi gathered her rapier from the grass, then her daggers, one retrieved from the dirt, the other from where it had fallen near the tent wreckage. Her fingers were steady now, despite the tremor in her ribs. She took one step, then paused at Corin's sprawled body. He wasn't moving much, but his chest still rose, faintly, stubbornly refusing to quit. Izzi walked right over him. Corin's eyes cracked open, unfocused, bleeding. His lips twitched like he wanted to spit something else. Izzi leaned close enough that only he would hear her and murmured, "Rot." Then she straightened and kept going. Kaelin's voice followed her, rough and quiet. "Come back alive. You hear?" Izzi didn't turn around, but she lifted a hand in a lazy little wave as if she were strolling to market instead of into a cave full of death. Don't die out here yourself, she called back, voice hoarse but wicked. Kaylin's huff of laughter came out pained, but it was still a laugh. Izzi didn't let herself look back again. She aimed herself at the cave mouth, at the carved steps, the old torches, the rune that had warned them. And she ran into the darkness alone.
Thank you for listening. Please like, comment, and subscribe. More chapters are on the way.